Elira moved through the crowded market of Gyron Prime, her long ears flicking nervously as she tried not to draw attention. Metallic stalls hovered on magnetic rails, vendors shouting over the hum of anti-gravity transporters. She kept her eyes down, careful not to bump into anyone, but the moment her foot caught on a loose hover crate, gravity, or at least her tenuous understanding of it, played a cruel joke. She tumbled forward, arms flailing, sending a tray of shimmering, floating fruit into a slow-motion dance through the air. A nearby drone beeped in confusion, and Elira's ears twitched so sharply she almost thought they would snap. "Watch where you're going, clumsy alien," a voice barked. Elira froze, embarrassed, expecting a tirade. But instead, a human tall, armored, and clearly unimpressed by the chaos, stooped and caught a tumbling fruit with one hand, while the other hand gestured toward her. "Unless you meant to start a fruit ballet, in which case, bravo." The human's tone was equal parts sarcastic and amused. Elira's ears twitched again. Sarcasm was a strange weapon she rarely encountered among her own people. I apologize," she stammered. Her voice was soft, almost musical, and her silvery hair floated around her shoulders in a way that made her seem smaller than she felt. "Apology accepted," the human said with a grin, tossing her the fruit he'd caught. "Name S. Jerk, Commander, occasional trouble magnet." "Elira," she murmured, unsure why she felt compelled to offer her name. Humans seemed to have a way of making her feel both small and significant at the same time, a confusing combination she didn't understand. Before Elira could respond further, a commotion erupted. A group of rogue maintenance drones had gone haywire, their magnetic claws swinging wildly as if possessed by some cosmic prankster. People screamed and scattered. Elira froze, unsure whether to run or hide behind the floating stalls. Jerk, on the other hand, shrugged and muttered something about how rogue machines are just misunderstood. Then, with a smirk, he sprinted toward them. Elira's instincts kicked in. Something about the energy field in the square felt off, a subtle vibration under her fingertips as she touched the edge of a hovering railing. Without thinking, she extended her mind, or whatever her people might have dismissed as an erratic imagination, into the field around the drones. A pulse of energy, soft but insistent, nudged the machines, redirecting their clumsy arcs away from panicked citizens and straight into an empty shipping bay. Jerk's eyes widened. "Okay, that was impressive. Did you just—" He waved a hand at her, but she only nodded, ears trembling. She had no words, not for the sheer thrill, the terror, and the unexpected pride that surged through her all at once. "Your species," Jerk said slowly, scratching the back of his neck, "definitely underestimates you." Elira's ears twitched in a way that almost felt like a smile. She hadn't realized that someone outside her people could see her differently, not clumsy, not fragile, but capable in ways that defied expectation. "Capable?" she whispered almost to herself. "Miracle," Jerk corrected with a smirk. "At least in my book. In theirs, probably the girl who trips a lot." He chuckled, tossing a small metallic fruit wrapper aside, narrowly missing a hover car. Elira's lips twitched with the beginnings of a laugh, something light that she hadn't felt in years. The market settled after the drones were redirected, leaving a few bemused vendors and an entirely too cheerful human soldier. Jerk offered his hand. "Come on, miracle girl. How about showing me what else you can do, or at least, how to survive Gyron Prime without causing chaos every 5 minutes?" Elira hesitated. The idea of venturing further, of risking more mistakes, should have terrified her. Yet something in Jerk's half-teasing, half-sincere gaze made her feel like mistakes weren't fatal, maybe even useful. She took his hand. As they walked together, Elira couldn't help noticing the strange humor in it all. A human, armored like a walking starship, finding delight in chaos. Herself, a supposedly useless alien, feeling capable for the first time. Even her ears, usually a source of ridicule, seemed to hum with a new kind of energy, as if agreeing silently with Jerk's assessment. "What exactly is a commander supposed to do anyway?" Elira asked, curiosity creeping into her tone. Mostly, Jerk replied, glancing at her with mock seriousness. Run toward explosions while everyone else runs away. Occasionally, solve impossible problems. And sometimes, just sometimes, recognize a miracle when it's standing right in front of me. Elira blinked. She had no idea what to say. She wasn't used to recognition, let alone this kind, playful and dangerous all at once. Next stop, Jerk said, motioning toward a hovering shuttle, galactic chaos level, extremely probable. Hope you like adventure, or at least floating fruit. Elira laughed. It was a sound that made her long ears flick like tiny sails catching wind. For the first time, she realized that perhaps uselessness was only a label given by those too blind to see potential. With Jerk beside her, she felt anything was possible, even surviving the galaxy, one chaotic step at a time. And as the shuttle lifted into the glowing sky of Xiran Prime, she couldn't help thinking that maybe, just maybe, being different wasn't a curse. It was her secret weapon. The shuttle shuddered as it exited the dense atmosphere of Xiran Prime, leaving a trail of glowing particles in its wake. Elira clung to the railing, ears twitching as the hum of the engines vibrated through the floor. Jerk leaned casually against the console, arms crossed, watching her with an amused smirk. "Relax," he said. "It only feels like we're about to be torn apart by a nebula, which technically could happen." Elira's eyes widened. "Nebula torn apart." Jerk rolled his eyes. "Dramatic effect, adds flavor. Don't worry, I have a 97.6% survival rate for first-time passengers. Mostly." "Mostly?" Elira echoed, gripping the railing tighter. "Fine," Jerk admitted. 93.4% if you count people who panic and accidentally eject themselves into space. But you look calm enough for now." She attempted a small laugh. Her long ears twitched so sharply it almost knocked over a floating toolkit. Elira realized she had never traveled beyond her home city. The stars looked completely different from her cramped observatory windows. They streaked past in streaks of blue and violet as the shuttle accelerated toward the outer rim, where a rogue faction had stolen a quantum core capable of destabilizing entire star systems. "Why do they always steal the dangerous thing?" Elira asked, leaning closer to Jerk. "Isn't there anything safer to steal?" Jerk chuckled. "Safety is boring, danger makes life interesting. And besides, someone has to keep us on our toes. You'll thank me later, probably." The shuttle jolted suddenly. Elira nearly collided with a control panel, catching herself with a telekinetic flick she hadn't consciously summoned. A stack of data pads floated harmlessly beside her. "You did that," Jerk observed with raised eyebrows. "Impressive. Did you mean to, or are your ears secretly controlling gravity now?" "Not controlling," she stammered. "I just reacted." Her ears twitched in embarrassment and Jerk laughed, a sound so loud it rattled the floating fruit containers he had insisted on bringing along. "Reactive miracles," he said, shaking his head. "I'm keeping you around just to mess with the universe." They spent hours navigating through asteroid belts and ion storms. Elira began experimenting subtly with her abilities, nudging minor obstacles out of the shuttle's path and stabilizing erratic energy fields. Each success bolstered her confidence, and Jerk began teasing her about her growing miracle quota. At one point, she accidentally created a mini gravitational loop that sent him floating upside down, limbs flailing. "Okay, okay," he shouted, laughter in his voice. "You win, I surrender to the miracle." Elira laughed too, the sound echoing in the shuttle's cabin. She realized she had never felt so alive, so capable, and so strangely connected to someone who saw her for what she was. Not clumsy, not useless, but potentially extraordinary. When they reached the rogue faction's orbital fortress, a massive structure of blackened metal hovering above a gas giant, Elira's anxiety returned. The fortress pulsed with energy, shields flickering in hues of green and gold. Jerk clapped her on the shoulder. "Welcome to the enemy's playground. Step 1. Get inside without being vaporized. Step 2, save the galaxy. Step 3, look fabulous doing it. Elira bit her lip. Look fabulous. Absolutely, Jerk said, mock serious. Nothing says hero like style under pressure. Inside the fortress, security drones zip past, their sensors scanning for unauthorized life forms. Elira studied the energy fields, her mind weaving subtle manipulations into the flow of the fortress's defensive systems. With a gentle wave of concentration, doors unlocked, cameras flickered harmlessly, and energy pulses diverted harmlessly into maintenance corridors. Jerk watched in awe as she moved with precision, turning her supposed weaknesses into undeniable strengths. "You really are a miracle," he whispered as they slipped through a labyrinth of corridors. Elira's ears twitched. "Not a clumsy girl," he continued. "A miracle." The rogue faction's leader, a hulking alien with jagged armor, appeared ahead, wielding a weapon that hummed with unstable energy. Jerk prepared to charge, but Elira held up a hand. Focusing, she manipulated the surrounding energy fields, redirecting the weapon's power in a harmless spiral that wrapped around a support pillar. The leader yelped in surprise, giving Jerk the opening to disable him with minimal effort. "See," Elira said, her voice light despite the tension. "Sometimes being different is useful." Jerk laughed, lifting her onto his shoulders in a rare display of humor amidst the chaos. "Useful? You're beyond useful. You're the kind of person the galaxy writes songs about, or at least funny songs about floating fruit miracles." They made their way to the quantum core, securing it before the rogue faction could regroup. Elira, still trembling from adrenaline, couldn't stop smiling. She had done something her people never imagined she could. Jerk noticed her expression and grinned. "You know," he said, nudging her gently, "if anyone asks who saved the day, just tell them it was me. Makes me look heroic." Elira rolled her eyes, but the corners of her lips twitched. "I think the galaxy would notice," she said, teasing him back. "Besides, you make a terrible hero pose." He pretended to glare, then dramatically flopped onto the floor in mock surrender. "Fine, fine. You get the glory, but only because your ears are too distracting to take seriously." For the first time, Elira realized the odd, teasing camaraderie she shared with Jerk was as important as the mission itself. She had entered the fortress unsure of herself, but she left with a growing sense that being different wasn't just acceptable, it was remarkable. And perhaps, just perhaps, she had found someone who could see her value beyond the labels her people had assigned. As the shuttle lifted off from the fortress, quantum core secured and rogue faction incapacitated, Elira leaned against the console, ears flicking with nervous energy. Jerk clapped her on the back. "Next stop, the galaxy doesn't even know what hit it, and maybe some R&R, or at least a proper zero-gravity snack." Elira laughed, feeling light and free for the first time in her life. The adventure was far from over, but for now, she allowed herself to enjoy the thrill of being seen, being useful, and being unexpectedly extraordinary. The shuttle rocked violently as it entered the nebula, a swirl of violet and turquoise gases that shimmered like liquid crystals under the distant starlight. Elira gripped the railing, ears twitching at the subtle vibrations of the chaotic energy fields around them. Jerk, seated nearby with a smirk plastered across his face despite the turbulence, waved a hand dismissively. "Relax. It only looks like we're threading a needle in a lightning storm. Minor exaggeration." "Minor," Elira echoed, peering through the viewport at clouds of ionized gas rippling unpredictably. "It looks like we're threading a needle while juggling starships." "That's the spirit," Jerk said, tossing her a small floating fruit in an attempt to lighten the mood. "Keep your eyes on the prize and not on the occasional death-by-gas storm scenario." Elira caught it reflexively, her telekinetic sense brushing against the swirling fields of energy around the nebula. She realized, as they hurtled through the storm, that every movement of the shuttle, every flicker of the ionized gas, was something she could influence if only subtly. Her confidence had grown, The girl who once tripped over crates now guided a vessel through near-impossible cosmic turbulence. Not bad, miracle girl, Jerk teased, narrowly avoiding a rogue plasma streak. You're making this look almost safe. Elira allowed herself a smile. Almost safe, she said, mock-offended. I'm perfection in motion. Perfection with long ears, Jerk added, waggling his eyebrows. Don't forget the ears. They burst from the nebula into open space, only to face the final threat. A massive rogue warship, its hull bristling with unstable energy cannons, slowly aligning for a devastating shot at the planet below. Jerk swore, but Elira stepped forward. She extended her awareness, sensing the delicate interplay of gravitational currents around the ship and the erratic energy pulses of its weaponry. Step back, she murmured, voice calm. I've got this. Jerk hesitated. I don't know if I should trust you with the fate of an entire system or my breakfast. Trust me, Elira said, ears twitching with focus. She directed a wave of telekinetic energy toward the warship, nudging its weapons slightly off course while simultaneously creating a subtle gravitational distortion that made the vessel list precariously. Alarms blared aboard the enemy ship, and the rogue captain roared in frustration, unaware that the useless alien girl was orchestrating its downfall from hundreds of meters away. Jerk maneuvered the shuttle with precision, slipping past the warship's remaining defenses, but Elira's intervention was what prevented the quantum destabilizers from firing. Miracle girl saving the galaxy again, Jerk said, hands on the controls, laughter in his voice. Elira allowed herself a small smirk. I prefer Elira, orchestrator of improbable victories. The rogue warship, destabilized by Elira's subtle manipulations, began to drift uncontrollably, eventually colliding with a nearby asteroid field in a spectacular explosion of light and metal. Jerk clapped her on the back as the debris cleared. Improbable victory indeed. They landed the shuttle on a nearby station orbiting the planet they had saved. The crew gathered around, cheering, but it was Jerk who whispered the truth. You know, Elira, your people may have called you useless, but I've never seen anyone handle chaos like that. You've changed, and not just for them, for yourself. Elira's ears flicked, her usual nervous tics replaced with something steadier, stronger. I suppose I have, she admitted. I used to think being different was a curse. Now I know it's my strength. Jerk nudged her playfully. Strength with a sense of humor. Don't forget that part. Galaxies love a miracle with a joke. They wandered to the observation deck, watching the stars twinkle in uncountable numbers, the galaxy calm once more. Elira's thoughts drifted to her people back home, the ones who had dismissed her. Perhaps they would never understand the scope of what she could do, but that didn't matter anymore. She had found someone who did, and more importantly, she had found herself. Think they'd believe the story? Jerk asked, leaning against the railing. Miracle girl saves the galaxy, human just looks heroic beside her. They might, Elira said, smirking. Or maybe they'll just call it luck. Either way, it doesn't change the outcome. And what an outcome it is, Jerk said, stretching dramatically. Saved planets, rogue warships neutralized, and 0 casualties. Well, except for a few floating fruit casualties, but those were heroic sacrifices. Elira laughed, ears flicking like sails catching wind. You really do exaggerate. Exaggeration is part of the hero package, Jerk replied. Besides, it keeps things interesting. The two stood side by side, watching the distant spiral of a new star forming, thinking of all the challenges they had overcome. Elira realized that the journey had done more than prove her worth to a human soldier. It had shown her that potential was never defined by what others could see. It was defined by courage, ingenuity, and a willingness to act when it mattered most. Ready for the next adventure? Jerk asked.